Okay, so not like super stoked about following stories about elephants, but it's chill. It's totally fine. Wearing my glasses this time so I can see everyone. And I'm going to be talking about humanitarian work and poverty alleviation a little bit. Kind of where I'm going. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we've missed the mark with humanitarian work. A little bit about things that we kind of need to know to do humanitarian work well. And yeah, so we can just jump right into that. So a few places where I think we've kind of missed the mark with humanitarian work is building houses. So have any of you guys done any type of humanitarian work or mission work or anything like that? Maybe like, it's like a few of you guys. Cool. So yeah, I think a huge place that we've kind of missed the mark is building houses. So the way that it works with most humanitarian or missions groups that are going down to building houses, they kind of get connected with a base that has some connections into the community, and they kind of just pick a family at random. So when you're doing humanitarian work, you're usually in like a high poverty area, so there's thousands and thousands of people who are in need of basic necessities like shelter or food or water, etc. So they kind of just pick a family that they know has needs that need to be met. But the problem with this is that we don't really get enough background information on people, so you don't really know anything about them. A huge thing that's happened, I've done like 14 short-term humanitarian trips and a long-term humanitarian trip. And one of the biggest things that we found out is that people rig the system. So we've met people, like specifically in Mexico is where I did my long-term one, we met people who had like 5 houses built for them by like humanitarian groups because they just don't do background checks, and so there's like these people majorly rigging the system. And it's really hard to choose too when you're in an area of thousands of people who are in desperate need. How do you choose what family deserves help and which one doesn't? Which can be really, really tough on a community too. It kind of creates some jealousy, there creates some tension in that. So I just think that with the house building, we've really, really missed the mark there. I think we miss the mark when we work with individuals rather than communities. So this kind of ties in with the house building, but when we choose to work with individual people instead of working with communities and things that are going to empower the community, we really just do like a half-assed job. Like we're not doing everything that we can do in those situations. And I think just one more thing that I want to touch on where we've missed the mark is that we give people things without them having any sense of belonging to it. So I've done 4 short-term mission trips before my long-term mission trip to Mexico, and a big issue that we've had there is that like we'll go down, build someone a house, it's super cool, we leave, we come back a year later, those people have abandoned the house. So you see like this entirely huge need that you're like, I'm the best person I know because I just built these impoverished people a house, and you come back the next year and they're gone. There's a reason for that. It's because they don't have any ownership. So you're giving them something that they haven't had to put any of themselves into, so they're living in a stranger's home. It's not theirs. They didn't have any accountability. They didn't have to give anything to receive that. And it's just like a fun fact, my church in Tabor does missions work. 6 out of the 11 houses that they built before they stopped building houses were abandoned by the families that they built before. So that's pretty interesting. We're obviously missing something there, hey? So like a few really important things to understand in the sense of poverty alleviation is poverty alleviation has like 3 really essential pieces to it. So it starts with relief, and relief is like the urgent and temporary provision of emergency aid to reduce immediate suffering from a natural or man-made crisis. So like people who are going onto the islands right now with Hurricane Irma that just like swept through and just destroyed stuff, that would be like a relief kind of idea. The next one's rehabilitation, so it's seeking to restore people and their communities to the positive elements of their pre-crisis condition. So rehabilitation happens after relief. So once things kind of start to get picked up again, people are receiving their basic needs, it's kind of like, it's the process after that where you're kind of getting people back into like their jobs and you're helping them get into back their normal life before the disaster. And then there's development, and development is kind of disconnected from these two. Development is a process of ongoing change that moves all people involved, so that means the people who are going to help and the people who are receiving help, closer to being in right relationship with self, others, and environment. So development, that is the process of poverty alleviation that most people do when they're going to do mission work or humanitarian work. But we get it really confused with relief and rehabilitation. So we go to these places and we try to provide relief and rehabilitation when it's not actually what's needed. What's needed is development. Another thing that's really important to keep in mind, white, not always right. The way that we do things here and that's successful for us does not always mean that we need to impose that on other people. We have to be sensitive to cultures and what makes sense long term. So big thing, we did some work in India when I was like in grade 12. And a big thing that people do down there is they wire up all these houses when they build them in India with electricity. People that you're building houses for, if they're too poor that they don't have a house, they probably can't afford electricity. So when you're building their houses, you have to set them up big windows, and you have to make sure that it's going to be an option for them to not have electricity in that house. But because we have electricity in our homes, and that's the way that we do things, we kind of forget that. And we forget that culturally and environmentally, it just doesn't make sense for where they're at. And lastly, people are people no matter what. So nothing that you ever do should be putting people in a place that makes them feel less than you, which is a really, really big issue in humanitarian work right now, because it kind of, it can create this emotional response that the best things that happen in these communities in third world countries are done by white people. And that's a super, super broken thing to have in a culture. You never want people to feel like the way that they do things culturally is wrong because it's not done by the people who come in and rescue them when they don't need rescuing. And then I just have a couple of points. This is all just like kind of sucky stuff, but these are some things that I think we could do to really improve the process. I think that community-focused building projects, if you're really stuck on needing to do a building project, which a lot of people are the way to go. So whatever you're doing should be building up communities and promoting development. So like building schools, community centers, things that are going to like empower communities and build people up as a whole. And then remembering relationship is everything. So if you are willing to like be in relationship with like a local company that does construction in a third world area that you're visiting for humanitarian work, that's going to be way bigger than you going down there and just being like, oh yeah, just like step aside, the white people are going to build you some things, just watch and hang out over there. It's way, way bigger to go in and be like, hey, we're here to help you. Like, do you have a construction company that already does this that we can assist so we know that this is being made the way that you do it culturally, the way that makes sense to you, that we're involving people from your culture? It's just always going to be it's always going to be more beneficial to do things that way. Culturally relevant, it's really important. And just encourage people to be part of building projects when you do them. Is just like what I said at the beginning. If people aren't involved and they don't have a sense of ownership and accountability, they're going to be abandoned or they're not going to take care of it, and it's never going to feel like it's theirs if people never get the opportunity to put any of themselves into it. And then finally, just stick with the 3 steps of poverty alleviation. Do what's like actually needed. Like, natural and man-made disasters are relief. Rehabilitation is after relief. Developmental is detached, and it's when there hasn't been a disaster, but there's still a need that needs to be met. And so when I did my long-term humanitarian trip, I worked at this place called Eternal Anchor. If you ever like have any questions about this, I can rant about it for hours, so please come talk to me about it. But it's it's a daycare for kids with special needs. In Mexico, they don't get to go to school, so it's really, really cool. But you can't interrupt people's lives when you do humanitarian work. You're there to help, not intrude and distract. But like they would have people come in and it would completely throw kids off for an entire week, and it's just not fair. So in conclusion, we've missed the mark. We have things to learn, things to remember, places to go. I think humanitarian work is always getting better. I think there's so much space to grow. So if you want to listen to me rant to you for another 10 minutes, feel free to find me.